Hello there! Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing great, thank you very much, and I'm so glad you've joined me for tonight's story. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, I was anchored to the kitchen sink on this gloomy, oppressive afternoon in my stone and wood ranch-style home in the Pacific Northwest, where the lugubriously gloomy sky was grey and overcast. Why did the weather have to be so miserable, I wondered? It was autumn, for goodness sake, and the temperature shouldn't have dropped so much as they had done so of late. It was not winter yet, but it seemed like autumn had decided to play truant for a few days, rather like a belligerent teenage student that wanted to hasten winter speedily along. I was wearing a sheer pink cashmere sweater to keep out the chill, and the weather reports had insisted it was likely to rain, with yet more torrential rain forecast for the next couple of days, which was a bummer, for we had been unfortunately experiencing a downpour for an entire week. The ground outside our home had become squidgy and saturated with water, so it was spongy to the touch. My husband had been trailing mud into the house. He seemed to conveniently forget to leave his boots parked in the hallway. I had grown used to the weather being capriciously unreliable like this. I could only hope that they had got their predictions horribly wrong, as I didn't fancy spending my entire life scrubbing the mud out of our cream carpet. The countryside was like an exquisite oil painting of bedazzling russets and golds, with deciduous trees bedecked in all their rich autumn finery, so that every single morning, when I stared out at the bewitching, prepossessing views onto our street, I marvelled at the beauty. But all of that was so sadly lost on this bleak, sorrowful afternoon. I hasten to say my best views from our bungalow-style home were observed from our wraparound porch at the back of our property, which overlooked our substantial-sized backyard, fenced in by a split-rail wooden pole fence that divided our property from a sprawling woodland oasis that belonged to a wealthy farmer who owned acres and acres of land. And in the furthest distance you could observe the smouldering smudge of the mountains, sprinkled so prettily with a light dusting of snow, sometimes even during the summer. Ostensibly whether sun, shine, wind or rain, the prepossessing views over the mountains were almost always picture-perfect, rather like a beguiling postcard you might see of the Swiss Alps. I considered myself considerably lucky to be living in this idyllic part of the world. It was approximately 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or thereabouts. I was washing up the dishes from a late lunch of cheese, ham, bread and pickles that me and my husband had only recently just enjoyed. I had been trying to get the spare bedroom ready for the arrival of my 7-year-old grandson, Oliver, who was going to stay with us for an entire week, and like any excited grandmother, I was looking exceedingly forward to spending some special quality time with the wee lad, something I had not been afforded for a very long time, thanks to my peculiar relationship with my somewhat sanctimonious daughter-in-law, Sasha. My position at the kitchen sink was steadfast. It gave me the quintessential perfect view over our street, and I was watching and waiting for only one thing, the arrival of my son Nick's black BMW, to roll up our drive. Where the hell was he, I wondered, as I washed the dishes rather cack-handedly in the sink. I wasn't paying much attention to the job at hand. Why was it when you waited for someone to arrive, time tended to stand still, like a lonely photograph, and never progressively move forward, almost as if it was stuck to one spot with superglue? "How long are you going to be there, love, staring out at the street?" said my husband, giving me a big sigh, and looking at me quizzically from his cell phone. He stared at me through steely grey eyes, his brows crinkled together in an exasperated expression. "Honestly, look at you, sweetness. Don't you know the saying that a watch teapot never ever boils? How long have you been standing there over the kitchen sink, staring so gormlessly into the ether? By the looks of things, those dishes of yours are not going to get washed. Broken, maybe, but washed, absolutely not. I know, but washing the dishes keeps me busy, love. I can keep my eye on the street standing here. I just cannot wait to see little Oliver again. Nick is certainly taking his time to get here. What on earth is keeping him? I feel like a child at Christmas, you know, with one of those kitchen calendars with little doors that you open every day, until finally you get to Christmas. That's how I feel about seeing Oliver again. I'm so excited, I can't help myself. They will be here soon enough, dear. Of that I am most sure. You're punishing yourself standing there at the kitchen sink, like a dog desperately waiting for his owner to get home. It's painful watching you, sweetness, if you don't mind my saying so. Well, can you blame me, love? How long has it been since I last saw little Oliver? It's been a month since Sasha has even bothered to drop him off here at our house. I honestly don't know what Nick ever saw in that dreadfully self-centered woman. I mean, of all the women he had to marry, why on earth did he choose her? She's so awfully detached and aloof, isn't she? I've never for the life of me been able to figure that wretched woman out. What makes her tick? She's an enigma to me, you know. It's like she's got such a hoity-toity superior attitude, as if she thinks she's better than everybody else. I blame her Uncle Nick for the way she turned out. When I met him at Nick's wedding, he admitted to me he had given Sasha everything that she'd ever wanted growing up, which explains why she's so dreadfully spoilt. I think he felt sorry for her, you know, losing her parents so young. The man is absolutely loaded. He came from a humble background himself, but he got rich quick with his success in architecture. Granted, Sasha's attractive in a manner of speaking, with her peroxide blonde hair and brown eyes. Well, if you like that sort of thing. But beyond that, there's not much more to her, is there? And that chin of hers, as far as I'm concerned, it's far too pointed. It would be a plus, of course, if she actually had an engaging personality. I was very close to Nick, our son. We were as thick as thieves until she came along to muddy the waters between us. I think she turned Nick against me. I don't think she's ever liked me. You don't know that for sure, love. Nick's a busy man these days. He probably hasn't had much time to drop in on us. Life can get ahead of us at times. Believe me, I know. This isn't about Nick, I said indignantly. It's that dreadful wife of his. I don't like to say this to you, Laurie, but I'm sorry. I don't like her one little bit. And as for them not dropping in on us, there is absolutely no excuse. It's not like they live in another state. They're only half an hour away from us by car. So why is it so rare that I ever get the privilege of seeing my grandson? It's like Sasha is stopping him from visiting us on purpose. I know she is. I'm sure she's not doing it deliberately, love. You're casting her in a very unfavourable light. It is true, we should see much more of our grandson than we do. But it's obviously not something they can help. I told you, we're not going to see Oliver more than we do. That wretched woman has decided she doesn't like me, and for the life of me, I don't know why she has so much disdain towards me. I mean, what did I ever do to her? I've tried to be the most friendly, warm, and welcoming mother-in-law, but never once has that woman responded in kind, by being remotely civil towards me in return. She treats me like a distant stranger that you might see at a bus stop or standing at the queue in the supermarket. It's very hard to try and like somebody that so obviously dislikes you. It's a two-way thing, you know. I'm sure, love, you've got it all wrong. I think Sasha's a complicated woman, that's all. She's very— Very what? I asked my husband brusquely. I don't know. A very contained, private person, I suspect. She was raised exclusively by her Uncle Nick. She never had a mother, did she? Nor did she have a father. Nick became a father to her. She was 5 years old when both her parents were tragically killed in that car crash. It can't have been easy for her. You're taking her insouciant attitude she has towards you personally. But I'm willing to bet that she's like this with everyone. It's who she is. I wouldn't be remotely surprised if she doesn't have many friends in the circumstances. She's not a desperately warm person. Even I am willing to admit that. I shook my head vigorously. You think Sasha's condescending with everyone, do you? That woman looks down on me, Laurie. I'm sorry she does. She's got one hell of a superior, vainglorious attitude. And it's because her Uncle Nick sent her to the best, most pretentious schools and colleges out there. She thinks she's all that. Whoever said there is no class distinction here in America? Let me tell you, it's alive and kicking. I'm telling you that. And Sasha Fontaine seems to think she's a little prima donna, whom everyone should idolize because she's so damn perfect. Love, you're being extremely unreasonable. I'm sure Sasha's a perfectly lovely young lady. You've misunderstood her, that's all. I don't think it's fair for you to assassinate her character. You don't know her well. Me being unreasonable? I don't think so, Laurie. That woman, I gritted my teeth together. If my son lives only half an hour away from us, we should see a whole lot more of him. And little Oliver. But we don't, thanks to that insufferable, obnoxious woman. Look, love, you're upset. You think Sasha's the reason we haven't seen Nick in a long time. You think she's keeping our grandson away from us. You resent her for that, which is perfectly understandable in the circumstances, but I think you're taking this far too personally. Family relationships, love, they're complicated at the best of times. When our children leave home, they have lives of their own to live. It's perfectly natural for parents to feel pretty redundant when their children don't appear to need them anymore. It can be upsetting, but it is what it is. Before I could respond to my husband, my heart lifted when I saw my son's black BMW rolling up our driveway and parking only yards away from the front door. He was here. Oh, my goodness, he was here. I couldn't help but rub my hands together in glee, my eyes lighting up like a Christmas tree. They're here, I said to my husband excitedly. They're here. I threw my bright yellow rubber gloves down on the sideboard next to the sink. I wiped my hands on the apron tied around my middle, which I threw haphazardly over the back of a chair. I hurriedly dashed down the passageway and bolted towards the front door, like an over-enthusiastic, ungainly dog that couldn't wait to see his owner. My heart melted when my 6-foot-tall son climbed out of his BMW and gave me a warm grin. Every time I saw my son, it was like the first time I'd held him in my arms over 37 years ago. I was filled with that bubbly, warm, fuzzy feeling that only a mother can truly appreciate, and it never ever left me, even though my son was now fully grown up. He had become a handsome-looking young man over the years, who was perfectly capable of looking after himself. Yet even when your fledglings leave the nest, the maternal instinct to watch over them never ever diminishes, no matter how old they actually become. When I studied my son, I was always struck with such pride that this debonair, very good-looking gentleman was actually my progeny, my flesh and blood. What had I done to deserve such a wonderful son? Nick sidled towards me, throwing his arms around me in an all-embracing big hug. I could smell his aftershave. He always smelt of Kouros, that I'd bought him his first bottle when he was only 12 years old, and he never wore anything else. I held him close to me, breathing in the lovely scent. I didn't want to let him go. It's good to see you, Mum. It's been too long. I'm afraid Sasha's been busy as a bee with the advertising company and all that. She takes charge over all of that, and she's passionate about it. But as a result, we've hardly been able to draw breath. It's been busy, busy, busy all the way, if you know what I mean. But as I keep saying to Sasha, you both live so close. We should see a lot more of you. It would be nice if we did, son, See more of you, I admitted. I pulled away from Nick, looking warmly into his eyes, stroking the 2-day-old stubble on his chin. I noticed he had bags under his eyes. He looked very fatigued. I was surprised he hadn't bothered to shave. He was normally quite fastidious about such things, but then again, it gave him a rather rugged appearance, which rather suited him. I know what it means to be busy, love, but I worry about you a lot. Are you sure you're not working too hard? I asked. I mean, are you eating enough? I think you look rather thin, if you don't mind my saying. I do believe you've actually lost weight. You must find time to eat, Nick. Otherwise you'll waste away before my very eyes. And we can't have that, can we?
I'm fine, Mum. Really I am. You worry far too much. You know what Sasha's like. She's a bit of a health nut. She's cut back on the meat in my diet. She says we should both be eating a lot less meat and more vegetables. So these days I'm eating a lot more lentils and beans. I don't like them very much. But you know what they say, Mum. Happy wife, happy life. It's such a dreadful cliché, isn't it? But in my experience, it's absolutely true. Got to keep the wife happy.
So that's why you're looking so gaunt. You're a red-blooded male, love. Men are meant to eat more protein than women do. I don't like the fact that you're eating less meat. I don't necessarily think that's a good thing. Why don't you buy grass-fed beef or something that's terribly healthy for you? Nothing wrong with wholesome meat full of iron and healthy vitamins to make a man very strong.
Try telling that to Sasha, Mum. She's insistent that we'll be healthier eating a vegan diet. But you're right. My clothes are hanging off me. I spend half my life fantasizing over a big red juicy steak. But don't tell Sasha about that. She's convinced that everyone in America eats far too much red meat.
I watched my son opening the back door of the black BMW to let my grandson Oliver out. He came charging towards me like a bat out of hell, throwing his tiny little arms around my legs in a bare enthusiastic hug, which made my heart melt like butter over hot toast. "Grammy! Grammy!" he cried out excitedly. "It's good to see you, Grammy. I missed you, Grammy, so very much. I missed you this much," he said, stretching out his hands as wide as he could. He smiled up at me with bright green eyes, framed by the longest dark eyelashes I'd ever seen. "It's good to see you too, Oliver. How have you been, my sausage?" "I'm fine, Grammy. I'm fine. Wait until I show you my new dinosaur. Mummy bought it for me to keep me company while I stay here with you and Pops for a whole week. I'm so glad I'm staying a whole week with you. If you press the button on my dinosaur's tummy, he can even speak, Grammy. I think I've got the only talking dinosaur in the whole wide world. His name is Mr. Spike." "Sounds lovely, dear. I can't wait to meet Mr. Spike in person." "Hello, Pops! Hello, Pops!" said Oliver, dashing enthusiastically over to my husband, throwing his arms around my husband's legs. And my husband, in turn, ran his hand affectionately through my grandson's frolicking dark curls.
"How are you, sport? It's very good to see you."
"I'm fine, Gramps. I'm really fine."
"Very good to hear that. Very good indeed."
"He's such a cherub, isn't he?" I said to my son, looking at my beloved grandson, with a besotted expression on my face, and a smile so wide I could have easily put a Cheshire cat to shame. "At 7 years old, I have to say, he's the spitting image of you, isn't he, when you were that age? With all that beautiful curly black hair and mischievous green eyes. It certainly takes me back in time to some wistfully nostalgic memories, let me tell you, of when you were that age."
"Well, that's what everybody says. They think Oliver's the splitting image of me," said Nick, looking pleased. "Oh, hi, Dad. Long time no see," he said. "You're telling me," said my husband with a chuckle. "Good to see you, son. The prodigal son returns, does he?"
I watched my husband embrace our son in a warm hug, while Sasha remained resolutely in the front seat of the black BMW. She hadn't even bothered to get out to greet us. How rude can you get? I could see her staring out at us through the passenger side window, as if looking at us was tediously boring, like watching paint dry. At least she'd got the good grace to give me a cursory nod, to acknowledge that maybe I did exist after all. Why was she just sitting in the front of the car, not bothering to even get out, to so much as even say hello?
"So, son, how has life been treating you?"
my husband asked.
"Your mother's a tad upset, I have to say, that we haven't seen you for a while."
"I never said that, Laurie," I said, giving my husband a warning look with my eyes.
"Your father exaggerates, love. I was saying that, it would be nice to see you more often, that's all." "About that, Dad, I'm sorry. We've been awfully busy, "Of course you have, son. Don't apologize to me. Life sometimes gets in the way, doesn't it? If you don't mind my saying so. You look rather worn out. I hope you're getting enough sleep. I notice you've got big bags under those eyes of yours."
Nick made a face.
"Dad, what are you like? You're as bad as Mum, both worrying about my eating and sleeping habits. I promise you I'm absolutely fine. I'm probably just burning the candle at both ends, that's all."
I smiled warmly at Nick as I ruffled Oliver's buoyant dark curls with my hands, as he stood at my side for a brief moment, before finally getting distracted by a bird perching on the fence in the backyard.
"Look, there's a bird over there, a big bird." "Well, I think you better go and see what it is, don't you?"
said Nick.
"We're your parents, love," I told my son. "We're allowed to worry about you. It's our privilege, You should know what it's like being a father yourself, now that you have a son. It would seem no matter how big your children get, you can't help but worry about them." All right, I get it," said Nick. "Are you sure, Mum, that you can look after our Oliver for a week? It's not going to be too much trouble for you, is it? I don't want to burden you both with too much responsibility. I'm afraid that Oliver may look like a cherub, but don't be deceived. Not all the pretty things wrapped up in charming packages are as benign as you may think they are. He can be quite the handful, Don't say I didn't warn you about him. You need to watch him like a hawk, have eyes at the back of your head. He can be quite mischievous when he wants to be, especially when Sasha's not around to tow him into line. Oliver listens to Sasha, but I suspect staying here with his grandparents, he'll feel like a tiger that has escaped the confines of his cage, so you need to watch him all the more. Of course it's no trouble, love, to look after such a little bundle of mischief. I may have my hands full, but it will be delightful to spend a whole week with little Oliver. I feel as if I haven't seen my grandson in an age."
I was pleased to see that my son had the grace to look apologetic about this.
"It's Sasha, Mum," he said, lowering his voice. "She's very particular, about everything. That's why she wanted Oliver to stay with you for a week. She doesn't want him around on the property while the builders are adding the extension to our home. He could end up getting hurt while the builders are using heavy-duty equipment, staple guns and so forth, if you know what I mean. Well, it's perfectly understandable that Sasha doesn't want him around on the property while that's going on. It's not good to have kids running amok on a building site, is it? There can be hidden dangers you never anticipated. Sasha's not wrong about that, son." "Thanks, Mum. I really appreciate you helping us out like this," said Nick boldly, sauntering off to the trunk of his BMW to remove Oliver's luggage, which included a big duffel bag, a box of toys, and a neatly printed file which he handed over to me. "Here, let me help you, son," said my husband, charging over to the trunk of Nick's BMW and lifting out Oliver's large box of toys, with Oliver reappearing from nowhere and eagerly trotting behind him, chirruping away. "Wait until I show you my dinosaur, Pops!" he cried out excitedly. "It's purple with pink spikes. It's cuddly. I go to bed with him every single night. His name is Mr. Spikes, 'cause he's got spikes down his back." "Well, let's go to your bedroom, Oliver," said my husband. "You can introduce me to Mr. Spikes if you like. I've never met a dinosaur before. This will be a first."
At this Oliver chuckled with delight. My son was holding a file in his hands, which he half extended towards me. It contained many neat printed pages that he was sifting through breezily.
Sasha drew this up for you, Mum. It's a list of instructions about what time Oliver needs to go to bed and have his bath and so forth. Then there's a list of what he's allowed to eat. He's not allowed to eat any flour products, according to my wife. But I would take that with a pinch of salt if I were you. But you never heard that from me.
Why? Isn't Oliver allowed flour? I asked curiously. He hasn't got a gluten intolerance, has he?
I don't think so, my son whispered to me. Sasha thinks he's gluten intolerant, but the doctor says he's a perfectly healthy 7-year-old boy. Sasha gets these strange ideas about things in her head. She's convinced he's allergic to wheat. One day, after eating a slice of cake at a kid's party, he was throwing up violently, and Sasha decided he was allergic to the wheat flour in the cake, which was ridiculous. I think he'd just eaten too much. As a result, she took Oliver to countless doctors, but all the tests gave him a clean bill of health. But of course, Sasha refuses to accept their diagnosis. She thinks they're all wrong. She doesn't trust doctors, even though she's taken Oliver to 6 doctors since in the last 6 months or so. They all agree he doesn't have a gluten intolerance. Anyway, she's drawn up a list of what Oliver can and cannot eat for you. She's very extreme, Mum, said my son, rolling his eyes in exasperation. Don't get me wrong, Mum. I love Sasha, but she can go overboard about things sometimes. Don't pay too much attention to the list, Mum. I can assure you Oliver is not going to keel over and have an anaphylactic shock if he ingests any wheat products. Far from it, in fact. Me and the wife cannot agree on this matter. She is insistent Oliver is allergic to just about everything. I don't want him to miss out being a little 7-year-old boy. But Sasha has relegated him to carrot sticks and hummus, if you know what I mean, which is a restrictive diet for a young boy, if you ask me. I suspect she's being overprotective, but you know what mothers can be like.
Oh, yes, I do, son. Only too well. You forget I was a mother myself. Still am. And a day doesn't go by that I don't worry about you, even though you're now all grown up. It goes with the territory of being a parent. Don't be too hard on Sasha, son. It's natural for a mother to be overprotective towards her son. But it sounds as if this so-called gluten allergy is more in Sasha's head.
My thoughts exactly, Mum. As a grandparent, you have full permission to spoil Oliver rotten, as long as it doesn't get back to Sasha, if you get my drift, he said, giving me a naughty wink. Let's just say if she thought you were giving Oliver chocolate cake, she would pretty much freak out. She's insistent he can't have any sugar. She always goes to the kids' parties with him to check that Oliver is only eating healthy stuff. I can't imagine what the parents must think, her being so strict about his dietary habits. I keep telling Sasha that this kind of restriction could backfire on us one day, when Oliver finally leaves home and decides to go ballistic over fast food, and as a consequence of such restriction, becomes morbidly obese. Surely there's got to be a healthy balance somewhere along the line, don't you think? Do you know in Auschwitz, when all those people pretty much almost starved to death, when those that survived were set free, some of them gorged themselves on chocolate so badly that the food killed them because they overdid it? I didn't know that, son. I agree with you. Balance is definitely key. I gave my son a reassuring wink. I was sure I could see an expression of frustration on his face, which made me wonder whether Sasha's pedantic ways were wearing him down. Did he have tireless nights arguing about whether poor little Oliver was allergic to gluten or not? Was that why he looked so exhausted? Maybe the couple could not agree on the best way to raise little Oliver. I imagined it wasn't easy getting through to a capricious, stubborn wife like Sasha, with her rigidly stiff views over everything. Being married to an opinionated, difficult woman must be no walk in the park for poor Nick. I felt much empathy towards my son, as if suddenly I could fully appreciate why his visits to my home were so fleetingly infrequent.
Don't worry, son. I'll read the file a little later. I just must say hello to your wife. I sauntered over to the black BMW and tapped on the window to get Sasha's attention. Sasha rolled down the window and said, "Oh, hello, Mrs. Gozeman. How are you?" "I'm very well, Sasha, and more to the point, how are you?" Sasha frowned. "You know, it's been busy, as I'm sure Nick has told you about it all. These building alterations, they're doing my head in, you know. I'm very grateful for you, Mrs. Gozeman, taking little Oliver off our hands during this chaotic week. It's dangerous for a kid to be hanging around heavy-duty machinery. I'm sure you appreciate that." Sasha was wearing dark glasses. Her blonde hair was tied back in a ponytail. She looked as glamorous as ever, but at the same time, she appeared rather standoffish and aloof. "Look, Sasha, don't sit there in the car like this. Why don't you come in for a coffee or something? We haven't seen you in an age. It would be good for us girls to catch up a little." "Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Gozeman. No can do, I'm afraid. Maybe another time, perhaps. I need to speak to the architect when I get back to our house. But as usual, Nick is dilly-dallying around, delaying everything. What on earth is keeping him? All he had to do was drop off Oliver's things, but as usual he's making a song and dance about everything. We need to get back to the house in time for our appointment with the architect. We're already running late. But it's very kind of you to ask us for coffee, Mrs. Gozeman. Let's put a rain check on that, shall we? Another time, perhaps." "I understand, love. Please call me, Susie. Mrs. Gozeman is terribly formal. You're my daughter-in-law, after all. You needn't worry about Oliver. I'll take very good care of him for you." "It's very important, Mrs. Gozeman. Oh, sorry, Susie, that you follow the food choices in the file that I've printed out for you. Oliver has a very bad gluten intolerance. He's not allowed anything made with flour. He can't have bread of any kind. I don't want him having any sugar whatsoever. Obesity, it's a major problem here in America. You should see a couple of the kids at Oliver's school. It's too shocking for words. They're like miniature sumo wrestlers. Their mothers just feed them sugar as if it's coming out of their backsides. I mean, what's wrong with people, Mrs. Gozeman? Can't they see they're killing their own children?" "Don't worry, love. I've got the list here. I'll be sure to give it my close attention." "Make sure you do, Mrs. Gozeman. Oh, sorry, Susie. Don't listen to Nick. He thinks I'm fussing over nothing. But I know my son. I'm a mother. If I say he's allergic to gluten, then he's allergic. Yes, we've been to various doctors about this, but what do they really know? In truth, doctors know zilch, absolutely zilch, about people's diets. I'm the one that sees my son's behaviour after he eats gluten, and it's definitely having an adverse effect on him." "Of course, love. Mothers know these things, don't they?" "Susie, just as you don't like being called Mrs. Gozeman, I hope you don't mind if I ask you that you don't call me love again. I find it rather condescending, if you don't mind my saying so." "Of course, love. Oh, sorry, Sasha. I'm very sorry, Sasha. Don't take offence. I always call people I'm very fond of, love. It's my being affectionate, that's all. I have no intention of being belittling or patronising towards you. On the contrary, the reverse is true." "Well, I would appreciate it if you called me Sasha. That's my name, after all. I even insist that my Nick calls me Sasha. I don't like being called any of these itsy-bitsy, ridiculously silly pet names. They're so dreadfully degrading." In that moment, I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. If anyone was being condescending here, it was Sasha herself. The woman certainly had a superior attitude, and I knew the first thing I would do for dinner tonight was order my little grandson a pizza. My son was right. There was no way poor little Oliver had a gluten allergy. I hate to say this, but a small vengeful part of me wanted to give my daughter-in-law the finger up, even if she couldn't see it. "Oh, sorry, Susie. My cell phone is ringing. I hope you don't mind my getting it," she said, waving a hand at me. I need to take it. Yes, hello, is that you, Nick? Oh, yes, how are you? Oh, I'm very well, thank you very much. Busy, 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 you know how it's been. Oh, awful. I'm exhausted, absolutely exhausted, and we haven't even started yet. Well, I hope you're going to be there at the building site. I'm relying on you big time. I need you to look over the plans for me. I need you to take a careful look. Sasha began waving me away from the car window, as if she was squatting a fly. My son came casually ambling over towards me, with a big friendly smile on his face.
I guess I better get going. I'm sure Sasha's told you we have an appointment with the architect. Sasha wants to make some last-minute adjustments to the design on the property. It seems there is no rest for the wicked. He chuckled. It's a pity, son, that you can't stay even for a moment. I never get to see you these days. I do wish you and Sasha would come in for a quick coffee.
Would love to, Mum. But I told you we haven't got the time. We'll have to put a rain check on it.
Maybe another time, love, I said, unable to disguise the disappointment. Did my son not realize how much I really missed him, ever since he'd married Sasha Fontaine, whom incidentally had insisted on keeping her original surname, claiming that Gozeman wasn't classy enough for her? I never got to see him, and there were some times in my life when I felt she'd stolen my son away from me, from right under my feet. My son threw his arms around me to embrace me in a warm hug again, and he gave me a tight, affectionate squeeze.
I love you, son,
I whispered.
I love you more, Mum,
he said cheekily. And when I looked at the adoring affection in my son's soulful green eyes, I knew he meant every word of it, and my spirits lifted exponentially. I felt my son's warm love for me, and it was unwavering, as it had always been. Even if Sasha had tried to steal Nick's affections away from me, the bond between a mother and son wasn't easily severed. My son loved me as much as he always had, and I had seen that love so clearly in his eyes. Maybe my husband was right. Nick lived a busy life. It stood to reason. He was a CEO of a textile company, and his wife was in charge of an advertising company. So perhaps it was unreasonable for me to expect to see more of him, or more of them, I suppose. I noticed that Nick was glancing nervously towards his wife and the black BMW, but Sasha appeared to be distracted by her phone call, and was momentarily, just totally absorbed. I saw relief wash over my son's face. He turned around, and to my amazement he whispered in my ear,
"When I get a chance at some point, Mum, well, after this chaotic week is over, that is, I would like to have a little wee chat with you about something personal, without Sasha or Dad around, if you don't mind. It's personal, but I will be in touch about that in due course."
My son's ominous words alarmed me considerably. What did he want to talk to me about that was so incredibly important that he didn't want even his wife Sasha to know about it? My heart began to flutter rather nervously in my chest, as my maternal apprehension, or instincts you could say, rose up from my belly to the back of my throat, so that for a brief moment I almost choked on my words. "Is everything all right, son? You're worrying me."
"Oh, Mum, there's nothing to worry about,"
said Nick nonchalantly, brushing his lips against my cheeks affectionately, and giving me another friendly nudge.
"I just want a little chat at some point with my mother, that's all. As you were saying, we haven't got together for a long time, have we? Maybe I can take you to coffee in town at some point. What's that lovely place called with the pink and white striped awning over the window, and those big hanging baskets of pink petunias?"
"Oh, you mean the gingerbread house?"
"That's the one. I seem to remember they do a mean death by chocolate cake there."
"They do indeed, son." "Sounds lovely. I look forward to it." Sasha, who'd wound up the window after her abrupt conversation with me, wound it down again. She was wearing a sizable frown on her face. "What's wrong with you, Nick? What's keeping you, for goodness sake? We need to get back to the house at once. Or have you conveniently forgotten about the appointment? That was Uncle Nick on the cell. He wants to give us some pointers about the renovation project. He says he's looked at the designs and thinks they could be improved upon."
"Her uncle's an architect," my son explained to me. "I think his input will be invaluable. Actually, I think he's a bit put out, because we hired another architect. I just didn't want to impose on Nick, take advantage of him, so to speak, because I knew he would do all the architectural design of our property for free, and I couldn't have that. You should see the house that Sasha grew up in as a girl. He designed it all himself. Sasha grew up with Uncle Nick. He's the one that raised her from when she was knee-high to a grasshopper. She was very little. You know her parents died in that accident. 5 years old she was. I seem to remember telling you the story. Her Uncle Nick is the only father she's ever known. But he's incredible as an architect. Absolutely incredible. I mean, he really is amazing, Mum. He's the reason I got my black BMW, by the way, at such a great price. He knows the guy who runs the dealership, so I got quite a sizable discount. He loves BMWs, drives a black one exactly the same as mine. It turns out we should have used him as our architect from the very beginning, because he's just going to change all the designs.
Nick, scolded Sasha, Susie doesn't need to listen to all this. You rambling on and on, especially about my childhood, for God's sake. We need to get moving. Hurry up, will you? Don't be a sloth all your life.
Sorry, you're right, we need to get going,
said my son, looking from me to my husband apologetically. My husband was standing in the doorway of the house, holding little Oliver's hand and smiling at Nick.
Goodbye, Munchkin,
said Nick, tweaking his son's chin.
You be a good boy for your grandparents, will you?
Of course I'll be good,
said Oliver, grinning from ear to ear.
You don't have to worry about me, Daddy. Grammy and Pops will look after me. Bye-bye, Mummy.
Bye-bye, sweetheart. You heard your father, said Sasha. I want you to behave yourself. You won't get up to any mischief, will you?
Of course not, Mummy. I'm always good.
Good boy, said Sasha, rolling up the window and lifting her hand to wave at her son, and then me and my husband as an afterthought. I watched my son climbing into the car, sitting next to his wife in the driver's side seat. Sasha appeared to be saying something to him. I knew she was telling him to get a move on. My son responded in kind by pressing his foot firmly down on the accelerator, and before I knew it the black BMW was all but a speck on the horizon. I felt a throbbing sadness wash over me, even though my beautiful grandson was looking up at me with big round green eyes.
What's wrong, Grammy? You look really sad.
Oh, do I, sausage? I said, tweaking his chin affectionately. Now don't mind your grandma. It's just sad to see your dad going away, that's all. Oliver looked up at me in surprise.
Dad's not going away, Grammy. He'll be here in a week's time to pick me up.
Of course he will, sausage. So there we are. That is the end of part 1 of our story. Part 2 is tomorrow night. Okay.